big stories. The government and the San Miguel Consortium formalized a 170.6 billion peso deal to rehabilitate NAIA. San Miguel CEO Ramon Ang lays out a number of improvements he wants to make, including building a bypass road and a new passenger terminal.
Senator Risa Hontiveros calls for the arrest of Kingdom of Jesus Christ leader Apollo Quiboloy and says he is effectively now in contempt.
And PCSO officials find themselves in hot water once again after Senator Rafi Tulfo found out that one bettor won the 3D lotto 36 times in just 6 months last year.
Good evening. Welcome to the show. I'm Regina.
I'm Gretchen.
And I'm Shawn.
Big news kicking off this week on a good note for a change. By that I mean that the 170.6 billion deal, PPP deal to rehabilitate NAIA has been signed. President Bongbong Marcos witnessed the signing of the landmark deal while Tycoon Ramon Ang represented the San Miguel-led consortium that won this bid. News 5's reporter Gerard De Peña covered that event and brings us the big story tonight.
Well, ladies, it's official. The Ninoy Aquino International Airport will be under new management not later than September this year. And that's after the government and San Miguel Corporation signed a landmark deal for the rehabilitation, operations, and maintenance of the country's main gateway. This is quite the welcome development for many considering the different issues that have haunted NAIA in recent years. There's the long lines and congestion in terminals, the issue with the Tanimbala modus, the series of power outages, and more recently, sanitation concerns with bed bugs and rats caught on cam. It's easy to tell why NAIA easily ranked as 4th worst airport in Asia. But this 170.6 billion peso concession deal hopes to change all that. Let's listen to San Miguel Corporation President and COO Ramon Ang.
Puro maintenance yan. Puro rehabilitation, repair and maintenance. Pagaganahin natin ng tama lahat ng mga electrical systems. We will check on all the generator, we will check on all the transformer, capacitor, circuit breaker, and yung mga wiring na baka kinagat ng mga mababait, di ba?
There's also plans to set up QR codes for passenger check-in and boarding and have a dedicated lounge for OFWs. Currently, NAIA accommodates around 35 million passengers each year. The plan is to double that to 62 million. Aside from those plans, the consortium is also looking to put up a bypass road from the Skyway Stage 3 to cut the travel time to NAIA Terminal 3. They also want to put up an elevated access roads in Terminals 1 and 2 and in the airport's car parks.
Meron kaming gagawing bagong karsada sa Skyway connecting to NAIA Expressway going down to Terminal 3 directly. So, from Skyway, you can be in Terminal 3 in about 10 minutes, di ba? And then from Terminal 3, pagdating mo naman, arrival passenger can easily go to Skyway and NAIA Expressway in 5 minutes. Kasi lalagyan din natin ng bagong 3-lane access yun. At gagawa rin natin ng U-turn access going to Pasay. So yung sinasabi ng Presidente, going and from the airport will be seamless. Totoo po yan. Yan pong lahat ng yan mangyayari siguro po up to next year of March before Holy Week.
Well, ladies, the consortium is also planning to convert the old Philippine Village Hotel into a new passenger terminal building to serve more passengers as well as to maximize the utilization of the runways. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that update, Gerard De Peña.
How did that make you feel? We're finally getting details.
Well, finally excited. But, the initial
Exciting.
details are that, the turnover is still going to be in September. But that agreement today is the beginning of great things to come for our airport. And hopefully, that was signed by Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista, MIAA General Manager Eric Ines, San Miguel Corporation CEO Ramon Ang, of course, and also present at that event were House Speaker Martin Romualdez and Senate President Mig Zubiri. So just a quick recap, that consortium, that one, is comprised of San Miguel, RMM Asian Logistics, RLW Aviation Development, and Incheon International Airport Corporation, offering to share 82.16% of future gross revenues with the government. That is, of course, twice or more than twice what the other bidders offered the government. Ramon Ang says they can make things better in as little as 6 months.
Short term, 6 months, wala na ng traffic, gaganda na lahat, mabilis ang pasok-labas. At 1 year, mas gaganda pa uli dahil matatapos yung mga infrastructure. And then 3 years later, pag natapos yung bagong terminal building, ay saksakan na ng ganda. Alam mo naman tayo mga Pilipino, marami naghahatid tsaka marami sumusundo. Ang tawag na meters and greeters. So, masasolve natin yung mga problemang yan. 6 months from the time we take over, ubus lahat ng problemang yan. Alam ko yung problema.
6 months.
Getting flashbacks, ah. Di ba, President Duterte also promised to stamp out a problem in 6 months. Anyways, as we heard, Ang enumerated a number of improvements that they will introduce. Let's break it down. First of all, they're building a 3-lane bypass road on the Skyway connecting to NAIA X that goes to Terminal 3 directly. So, long story short, from Skyway, you can be at T3 now in about 10 minutes. And the connections between the terminals will be better too.
There's also the new passenger terminal, which, as Gerard has said, will be built, if you guys remember, where the decrepit Philippine Village Hotel is now. The expected capacity is at about 35 million to be built within 2 to 3 years. They will also be building walkolators or elevated access roads between Terminals 1 and 2, as well as the car parks, and a new OFW lounge. And then, of course, they will fix the electrical systems and air conditioning. Kasama na po dyan yung mga chairs. As expected, Ramon Ang was asked about the recent bedbugs problem, and this is what he had to say about that.
Ako na yung mag-aasikaso ng paglilinis. Rest assured, I will make sure na malinis lahat yan. Hihimayin ng gusto yan. At mag-a-assign ako ng tao na mga matatandang dalaga na magbabantay niyan day and night na talagang sobrang linis niyan. Pati sahig niyo makintab. Ayan. So, mga kababayan, pinapakiusapan ko kayo lahat. Huwag niyo nang pag-uusapan yung surot at daga na yan. Nakakasira sa bayan natin yan at baka wala ng turista pumunta rito.
I'm not sure if he was kidding or he was serious on that.
Well, you
It's a
know,
little bit sexist, I have to point out, yung matatandang dalaga
Dalaga pa.
part. But we get his point. He's gonna clean it up.
yes, but you know, I just came from Singapore and they do employ senior citizens that way. They make them do like minor cleaning jobs. Hindi naman yung heavy, pero I think it's good also for
That's
seniors.
inclusivity. in
Yeah,
terms
they'll
of
still be
employment.
productive.
But it's not just the basics that they're talking about here. Siyempre, gusto rin natin pagandahin pa. So, Mr. Ang said that they will also deploy QR codes and better X-ray machines, also maximizing the current runways. So we go from 40 takeoffs per hour to 48 takeoffs per hour. The government will hand over operations of NAIA in September after a financial closing that's expected to take 6 months. So, marami tayong
Soon
abangan.
enough, yeah.
Yeah, but imagine mo, so by September, then he says you can feel the change after 6 months, so by next summer vacation.
Sinusulat natin
Sorry,
yung
parang
September.
president.
Lilipad tayo ng September, pero sinabi niya yung bypass road at yung elevated access road from T1 and T2 to the car park will be 1 year from now. So, March before Holy Week.
So what you're saying is we should write all of this down and then hold him accountable.
Yes,
Yes.
for
We
sure.
call him up in within 6 months' time
That's
and say,
what we
Mr.
do
Ang,
to our politicians.
That is
Well,
right.
for sure that press con is forever on the internet. But again, the concession that San Miguel got for the NAIA rehab is for 15 years, which is extendable by another 10 years. Recall that San Miguel is also building another airport in Bulacan. So Mr. Ang said that will be done by 2027 and can accommodate 100 million passengers immediately. It will also have 4 runways. And on top of all of that, there will also be a car racetrack, a venue for concerts. So he said, quote unquote, it's world class.
It's a pity we don't have pictures of those yet
Yeah.
because this is just his, this is just him holding the first press conference about this, telling us what he's planning for it.
Well,
But,
speaking
if you can
about-
visualize
Yeah,
it.
speaking about off-the-cuff statements, I'm not sure if this was one of them because transfer groups are now rejoicing over Mr. Ramon Ang saying that the controversial Pasig River Expressway, or PAREX, will not be continued. Here is what he actually said.
Nag-propose ako Pasig River Tollway para ma-decongest nga yung mga east and west na tao. Pero sinasabi ng mga raming tao na ayaw nila yan dahil yan laban sa kalooban nila o hindi magandang tingnan or whatever. Narinig di ba tinuloy ko? Hindi na. We are very sensitive to the opinion of the public. If the public thinks that it is not good to the public welfare, hindi namin gagawin yun.
I think that's his first statement about that.
Yes.
Transport
Di ba,
groups-
we were wondering here, right here on this couch when we were talking about the Pasig River Esplanade, kung matutuloy nga ba itong Parex. Nobody seemed to know the answer at that point. But as of today, nilinaw na ni Ramon Ang na wala na ngang
But
Parex.
the transport groups are also calling for the environmental compliance certificate to be withdrawn in light of what Mr. Ang said. If you recall, the Parex was supposed to be a 19-kilometer elevated tollway spanning the length of the Pasig River, which environmentalists opposed.
For a number of reasons, being that they think it's not going to necessarily fix traffic. It's a bit
That's
of an eyesore. It's going to damage the communities and bring pollution to the communities around it. But it's good to hear though that they are sensitive to public opinion, as Mr. Ang said.
That's right. Well, we will hold them to account on the promises on NAIA, for sure.
Let us write that down and then let's put it in a spreadsheet.
Well, in other news, we're doing all of those improvements so we could welcome visitors here the right way.
Proudly.
And speaking of visitors, one is expected to come, a high-level official. The U.S. Secretary of State, to be exact, Mr. Anthony Blinken is expected to arrive in the country tonight. This marks Blinken's second visit to the Philippines, and he will be staying until tomorrow, March 19. Blinken is expected to meet with President Marcos and Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo to discuss progress in bilateral ties between the U.S. and the Philippines. Key issues expected to be tackled include the two nations' economic cooperation as well as regional issues, particularly the maintenance of peace and stability in the West Philippine Sea. This comes just a week after another top U.S. official, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, led a presidential trade and investment mission to Manila on behalf of U.S. President Joe Biden.
So how should we read into all these overtures from Washington? For some insights, let me bring in Dr. Renato De Castro, International Studies Professor at the De La Salle University. Good evening, Professor. Thanks for being with us again.
Good evening, ladies. Nice to see you again.
Great. So there's the question right there, right? What do we make of all these overtures from Washington? By that, I mean Secretary of State Blinken is coming to visit again tonight for the second time. And then that's just coming on the heels of Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo bringing a whole delegation of business executives and leaders from Washington to here. And also the fact that, just last year we saw Vice President Kamala Harris. We in previous, before that, there was also Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin coming to visit. So it feels like Washington's stepping up its overtures and almost courting Manila. What do you think?
Well, it represents, of course, a holistic approach on the part of the United States and also in the Philippines. Last week, of course, we have the visit of a huge business delegation led by U.S. Secretary of Commerce Secretary Raimundo, which represents, of course, economics. But, of course, President Marcos emphasized it is not simply economics, not simply business, it's also linked with security. Thus, you have the term economic security. Now, of course, you have Secretary Blinken, emphasizing, of course, the other dimension of our relationship with the United States, which is, of course, our alliance, and, of course, our very intense security relations. And of course, has been brought about by what's happening, the dynamics that's happening in the Indo-Pacific region.
All right, Professor, we know China, of course, tunes in to what we do here in the Philippines, and they probably take note of all these government officials at the high level visiting the Philippines from the United States. Do we expect China to come out with a statement or any reaction on this visit?
I expect it 100%. I bet my bottom dollar. Everything that we do has been subject to Chinese scrutiny in a way that it seems that China is treating the Philippines as a vassal or a tributary kingdom. Just last December, you have the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi scolding Secretary Enrique Manalo just because from the Chinese perspective, we have changed our foreign policy. We expect it. But of course, we have to emphasize, we have to tell the Chinese that the Philippines is a sovereign, independent state that is entitled to its independent foreign policy. And tell basically the Chinese, this is none of your business. Because we're a sovereign, independent state, the Philippines is not a tributary kingdom of China.
Well, Professor, what are you personally expecting from this meetup with Secretary Blinken? This is
As
said
usual,
to...
you will have an announcement from their foreign minister spokesperson. I don't know who, probably a lady who else who again will scold us of violating our agreements with China. The term they use when Secretary Gov't went to Batanes and announced that we're strengthening our military presence, we're stroking the fire. So expect all of those rhetorics again. I'll be more surprised if the Chinese Foreign Ministry or even Defense Ministry will keep quiet about this.
But let's take a look at the meeting between the Secretary of State of the United States and also President Marcos. What are you expecting from that? It's said to strengthen the trilateral ties amongst Japan, the U.S., and the Philippines. Are you expecting deals here, or is this a mere overture?
It's a prelude possibly to a summit meeting in Washington in April, where the three countries, and of course they're linked. The Philippines and the United States are, of course, treaty allies. Japan and the United States are treaty allies. The Philippines and Japan are security partners. And of course, the security partnership would be strengthened by, the possibility, the prospect of a reciprocal access agreement. So there's, of course, a chance that the three countries would discuss the prospect of, this is a term that's being used recently, minilaterals, or sometimes you use the term trilateral. So you have the U.S., Japan, Philippines trilateral security partnership.
But actually, we haven't confirmed whether Japanese Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa is coming. That's something that we are still verifying at the moment. But if it does indeed turn into a trilateral, what's the significance there for us, the fact that it's being held in Manila?
Again, this is just a preliminary negotiation. It's also symbolizing the fact that this trilateral relationship is focused primarily in boosting the Philippines as, of course, a treaty ally of the United States, of course, security partner of Japan, and, of course, a significant actor or agent in the Indo-Pacific region. Again, this is something that, of course, President Marcos raised last year during his intervention in the East Asian Summit. China seems to ignore the Philippines as an agent. China is basically looking at us as a puppet of the United States. So by holding the meeting here, the United States, Japan, and of course the Philippines is telling the Chinese the Philippines is an active actor in the Indo-Pacific region. You cannot simply ignore the Philippines as, capable of coming out with this agency, capable of implementing an independent foreign policy.
All right, Professor, we all know, of course, that the president is fond of showing off the Philippines and offering it for investments, foreign businessmen. As a matter of fact, he just came back from Australia. He just also came back from Central Europe, where he met with Czech President Pavel. Now, it also seems like he is currying support for our cause in the South China Sea. Would this be something that he is actively doing, or is this something just as a rote, diplomatically speaking?
Well, you have to understand, the president is not only the architect of foreign policy. The president, as the Constitution provides, the president is the country's top diplomat. So he's basically simply doing his job as the country's top diplomat. Of course, this question is often raised given the fact that we have two presidents, the late President Benigno Aquino III, and of course the former President Rodrigo Duterte, who of course is very much aware of this task, but they don't like it. I still remember the late President the late President Benigno Aquino III. I still remember this during his inauguration in 2010. Said, I won't travel abroad. I have my foreign secretary, and of course we know for a fact President Rodrigo Duterte simply does not want to travel, especially in Western countries. But right now, we have a president who is very much aware of his job as the country's top diplomat. And of course, he, in one way or the other, he enjoys doing it. And we could link it with the fact that, of course, he learned it He got it from his late father.
Well, Professor, let's take a
Those
look.
who are aware of, those who have studied Philippine foreign policy at my age, if you look at our diplomacy, the diplomacy or the foreign policy of the late Ferdinand Marcos Sr., it was, landmark efforts. He basically transformed Philippine foreign policy in the 1970s. So just as the saying goes, the fruit never falls very far from the tree.
Well, like, a little bit like his mom, too, I could say.
Oh, yes, of course. But I would rather focus on the father.
Well, Professor, ask the Philippines' top diplomat, what do you think should be the asks of the president here? I mean, we're in the middle of, I guess, a very, very strategic position in Asia. Let's take a look at the EDCA sites for one. What have you heard that has been improved there? And also over in Batanes, your thoughts on the Navy recruiting more reservists?
Well, of course, it's strengthening our capabilities. Again, this is part of our effort to assert an independent foreign policy. An independent foreign policy could not be implemented if you don't have a credible military capabilities. EDCA, the military exercises under Balikatan that might be conducted in the Batanes and of course in Palawan are aimed to develop the armed forces of the Philippines into a credible defense force. So we have to back our diplomacy with a credible military capability. This part, given of course the dramatic changes that are happening in the Indo-Pacific region. Just look at what Japan did last year. Japan decided to increase its defense budget by about 2% of its gross domestic product.
Yet,
and of course,
should we see
Yes.
more joint patrols with the United States for one? I mean, given the recent tensions in the West Philippine Sea, we already saw some Philippine crew getting hurt there. Shouldn't we expect more on that and seeing boots on the ground or in the seas?
yes, and it will not just be bilateral, especially if Japan will jump in. We might see trilateral, and even if then we bring in Australia, you could see even quadrilateral military exercises, or what they call maritime cooperative activities that's going on. This is part of course, also training the Philippine Navy.
Okay, Professor, you mentioned that all this visit by the Secretary of State could be a prelude to a meeting in the United States, perhaps in the summer. Now, we all know the U.S. elections happens in November of this year. Could we also say that maybe this is a way of securing our position, our mutual defense treaty, our alliance treaties with the United States in case of whatever happens during their next election?
Well, when it comes to U.S. foreign policy in the Indo-Pacific region, when it comes to U.S. alliances in the Indo-Pacific region, U.S.-Japan, U.S. South Korea, U.S. Australia, U.S. Philippines, there's actually a bipartisan consensus. Whether whoever will sit in the White House, whether the current president or the former president, I expect continuity, especially with U.S. policy in the Indo-Pacific region. There is a bilateral consensus. Both the Republicans and the Democrats are very much aware of what from the perspective of Washington, what is basically the clear and present challenge to U.S. Foreign policy interests or U.S. security interests in the Indo-Pacific region. It's kind of different in Europe, but in the Indo-Pacific there is a clear bipartisan consensus.
There's bipartisan consensus, yes, but we also know that Trump and Biden have very different approaches to foreign affairs. Trump tended to turn the country more inward, make America great again. Hey, that was his tagline. And then Joe Biden, of course, went out of his way to quote all of Southeast Asia. So there's still very different approaches there. Do we not, despite that, expect any changes?
Well, the president might have his personal preferences, but then he would have to deal with the national security institution. He would have to deal with the State Department. He will have to deal with the defense, the Pentagon. He will have to deal with his own National Security Council. It's a totally different picture when you talk about, the foreign policy and national security community in the United States. I still remember when the former President Trump announced in 2018 that the United States might withdraw from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. You have an uproar in the State Department, in Defense, and even in the U.S. Congress. So yeah, you might have certain preferences by a certain president, but whether, of course, he would be able to turn, the bureaucracy to follow his preference is, of course, another matter. It's just like, I remember this term, it's just like turning an aircraft carrier on a dime.
We shall have to wait and see. If
You have to deal again. When you
Yes.
talk, just imagine, you have to deal with the Pentagon.
Yeah.
During the time of
Yeah.
President Trump, he wanted to withdraw American forces from Afghanistan. He was determined.
Yeah.
But of course, he was opposed by the intelligence community. He was opposed by the Defense Department. So again, you have the personal preference of the president, but then he would have to deal
Yeah.
with the huge bureaucracy. Of course, the foreign policy, then of course the national security
Right.
communities.
Very good points, but I guess only time will tell. We're going to have to leave that there for now. Thanks once again for joining us tonight, Dr. Renato De Castro. He's the International Studies Professor at De La Salle University.
We're going to be pausing for a quick break for now, but right after that, Senator Risa Ontiveros renews calls for Apollo Quiboloy's arrest. Find out why when the big story returns. Keep it here.
Welcome back. You're still watching Big Story here on One News. Senator Risa Ontiveros once again called for the immediate issuance of an arrest warrant against Kingdom of Jesus Christ leader Apollo Quiboloy. She said the latter's response to the Senate panel's show cause order was, quote, nowhere near satisfactory.
Isa pong naging maliwanag sa aming pag-review. His explanation is nowhere near satisfactory. They did nothing but rehash previous arguments they made for not attending our Senate hearings.
Currently, Ontiveros said the committee ruling to cite Quiboloy in contempt is being delivered to Quiboloy's legal counsel. Once it is received, she said she will follow up the issuance of an arrest warrant against Quiboloy with Senate President Mig Zubiri. For his part, Zubiri said he will review Quiboloy's response and decide on the arrest warrant issuance soonest. Now, despite being subpoenaed, Quiboloy repeatedly skipped the Senate hearings. Later on, supporters released a list of 17 conditions that he allegedly said needed to be met before he appears. One of which was that the Senate pay for his trip expenses, including private jet flights.
This level of mockery of a constitutional exercise of duty by a committee of the Philippine Senate is unprecedented and disturbing. I request for the Senate President to issue an arrest order against Apollo C. Quiboloy. He must show up. He must respect the institution of the Senate.
It's not just the Senate that wants to get a hold of Quiboloy. Even the House of Representatives is closing in on his SMNI News Network. We have Camille Samonte to give us the details. Camille, what do you have?
Reg, the leadership of the House Committee on Legislative Franchises said that the detention order against Quiboloy is still on hold. This is despite the lapse of the extension given to the pastor to communicate with the committee on March 15, Friday midnight. According to Committee Vice Chairperson Johnny Pimentel, they do not want to preempt the Senate's actions because they also have a pending contempt order against Quiboloy for alleged violations of SMNI. Currently, the proposal to revoke SMNI's franchise has passed the second reading in the House of Representatives. However, there are other resolutions being discussed by the committee, such as those concerning the dissemination of fake news and red tagging. The author of the proposal to revoke SMNI's franchise, One Rider Party List Representative Gutierrez, himself believes it would be better if the Senate takes the lead in arresting Quiboloy.
Baka mas appropriate that the detention order be with the Senate. So again, this is all up to the leadership, hindi pa tayo sigurado, but it might be more relevant for the Senate to now take a lead. Of course, if the House leadership, through the Secretary General, does decide to seek out the detention order, and if there's no need for him here, the custody could then be passed on to Senate rin. So that's another option on why the House might still pursue the detention despite passing on second reading. So just like RBH 7, unprecedented, pero it remains to be seen po.
It is expected that this week, the House will also pass on its third and final reading the proposal to revoke SMNI's franchise. There is currently tight surveillance on the possible whereabouts of Pastor Apollo Quiboloy in Davao City, as his arrest may happen this week by the House of Representatives. Reg, at his prayer mountain in Barangay Tamayong, it's noticeable that there's a sign outside indicating that it is no longer open to the public. Only members of the pastor's church are allowed entry. The situation is similar at his Kingdom near Davao Airport in Barangay Buhangin, where entry is restricted to a select few. Reg?
Thanks for that update, Camille Samonte. Well, today, Senator Risa Ontiveros also signed the Magna Carta for Children bill, and at the event, she talked about the alleged victims of Quiboloy as well as that of Senor Aguila, the alleged cult leader in Socorro Town, Surigao del Norte, whose victims had also apparently run to Senate for help. The Magna Carta advances children's rights and protection in the country. It calls for the creation of the Philippine Commission on Children, which is a government body that will spearhead the work on children's welfare. Apart from Senator Ontiveros, the other signatories of the Magna Carta were Representatives Yeda Romualdez, Jude Osidre, and Angelica Natasha Cole. A number of NGO partners like UNICEF, Save the Children, and Child Rights Network were also on hand to witness it.
And still in the Senate, PCSO officials were grilled again at today's probe over the integrity of the agency's lotto games. This time around, Senator Raffy Tulfo alleged that a single bettor won almost 40 times in consecutive months. In the continuation of their hearings into PCSO, Senator Tulfo said that according to his investigations, a single 3D lotto bettor won at least 36 times. What's even more questionable is, according to Senator Tulfo, is how this bettor won this many games in just 6 months.
Nandun yung uniformity na every month, tinatamaan niya yung tigti 225,000 pesos na premyo. Po yung probability na one person will hit many times in the period of 6 months with the same amount.
Senator Tulfo presented this slide during the hearing, showing all the times that the bettor, whom they call Person B, won last year. This data came from the PCSO itself. It shows that Person B won 225,000 pesos for each win, and there were even months when he won the 3D Lotto at least 9 times. That was in August and November. In total, Person B's prizes have reached over 8 million pesos in the span of just 6 months. Ang explanation dyan ng PCSO is yung Person B only represents one agent who claims the jackpot prize in the main branch of the PCSO. Hindi raw yung mismong mga winner ang nagka-claim ng premyo, kung hindi itong lotto agent na ito. Let's listen to how the PCSO explained it.
So agent na pinakikiusapan ng mga kanyang bettors, and definitely when he goes to the branch, kasi 10,000 and below, kaya pa po yan ng outlet. 10,000 and above, up to 300,000 pesos, he has to go to the branch. Pag kayo pa, ang branch po normally, nasa Kapitolyo yan eh. So kung nasa malalayo kang lugar, ang logical po and practical way is to talk to your most likely suki muna, pakisabay na ito.
Ang sabi naman dito ni Senator Tulfo, hindi dapat yung agent ang kumukuha ng premyo, dapat yung mismong winner para matiyak ang tunay na pagkatao niya. And also to make sure that the person is not connected to officials or employees of PCSO. Senator Tulfo also found out that most of the 3D Lotto winners came from Butuan City and Agusan del Norte, so he thinks na may nagtitimbre sa mga tumataya sa Butuan para lumaki ang kita nila. However, the Agusan del Norte branch of PCO says patok lang talaga ang 3D Lotto sa kanila. Listen to this.
Parang sigurado na silang lahat na sila'y mananalo. That's why they have to bet 500 pesos. Kasi kung ako, ba't ako magbebet ng 500? Hindi nga ako sigurado. Tsambahan yan, kahit na 3 digit. So baka nabigyan siya ng tip. Walang iniwan niya sa weteng. Pag nabibigyan ng tip, tataya ng winning number, nananalo.
So 500 is the most convenient na kapag panalo ka na, hindi ka na pupunta ng Manila. Kasi pag mag 1,000 ka na, that's already 450,000. Sa nakita nyo, may isa po dyan na claim niya po sa Manila. Yun pong 450,000.
Senators are also concerned over people using Lotto as an investment. Remember that back in January 16, may namuhunan daw ng 90 million pesos over 3 Lotto outlets in Manila. The Anti-Money Laundering Council, or AMLAC, will also be looking into this supposed anomaly.
It's also a big question. No? I didn't realize you could ask the agent to claim for you.
Kaya
And why
nga
would
eh.
one outlet have so many wins?
I think that's the
Kahit na
question.
hindi siya mega lotto, even if it's small amount.
And usually you're so protective over your winnings, so why let somebody
Yung
else
initial
claim?
explanation niya from another hearing was that, kunyari may-ari ako ng lotto, tas nanalo yung mga customers ko. A lot of the time, they don't have the means to go pa to the main office to
it's
pick it
far.
up. Parang ganun. So, sila daw na mamagandang loob. Kasi suki-suki nila yan eh. Diba?
Well, yeah, it raises questions like those. But I'm quite curious about the type of game. We should have some simulation.
I'm
here,
curious bakit hindi
right?
ako swerte.
Like the
Sa lotto.
probabilities of winning and guessing. And
Okay,
all
in the
those.
meantime, we gotta go to break.
In the meantime, the No Permit, No Exam Prohibition Act has been signed into law. We'll be speaking with DepEd Assistant Secretary Francis Bringas on how this benefits students and their parents when the big story returns. Keep it here.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News. Students who have yet to pay their tuition fees due to financial challenges no longer have to fear not being allowed to take their exams. President Marcos has already signed into law RA 11984, or the No Permit, No Exam Prohibition Act. What this means is that students may take their periodic or final exams even if they have yet to pay their tuition or other school fees. Kabataan Party List Representative Raul Manuel says he is in favor of this new law, except for the provision that requires students to show proof that they cannot pay their fees before the exam. But the Education Department says this is among the concerns that they aim to address in the law's implementing rules and regulations, which they are currently drafting.
Let's try to dig deeper into this No Permit, No Exam Prohibition Act. We have with us on the line tonight DepEd Assistant Secretary for Operations and Deputy Spokesperson Francis Bringas. Good evening, Asec. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, Gretchen, Regina, and Shawn. Good evening to all your televiewers and listeners.
We've heard both sides of this argument, but in general, of course, the schools are happy about it. But what do you think about the implementation of this RA 11984? Also, as we said, the No Permit, No Exam Prohibition Act. Do you think it might impact students facing financial challenges?
Oh, definitely. Definitely, the law would be a what do you call it? It would be a good opportunity for all our learners to be accommodated in all our private schools, particularly because they are the ones who are really affected by this law. And it is very welcome development for the Department of Education, particularly for learners in the private schools who may not have the enough capacity to be able to pay for their tuition, especially during periodic exams and final exams. But the only thing is, of course, the certification that they need to get from the Department of Social Welfare and Development.
Okay, Asec, very quickly, no, March 11 po ito pinirmahan ng Presidente. When will this take effect? And when will the IRR be finished?
Well, according to the law, it has to be like 15 days after its publication in the Gazette. So we will have to count from the date of the signing of the law. And then the DSWD will have to prepare the IRR as well for the criteria to be able to give the certificates of a disadvantaged status for learners who may want to avail of this provision of law.
How long is that going to take?
Well, normally it would really take like 60 days after the approval of the law. That is the normal period by which the IRRs are supposed to be prepared by the concerned agency.
Asik, yun nga lang, may criticism po dito, no, na kailangan pa mag-secure ng certification mula sa DSWD. Doesn't that defeat the purpose of this act? Because you need to get that certificate 60 days before. Kumbaga, parang hindi ka pa rin pwede mag-exam kung wala ka nung certification na yun.
Yeah, definitely. That is provided by the law, no? So kung titignan natin, it may probably be a regulation or a control of whatever the law is, how the law is going to be implemented. But definitely the DSWD is going to look into this, hopefully in the crafting of the IRR, so that the spirit of the law will still be, the purpose of the law will still be met, regardless of the provisions that we have. So it will still depend on the IRR.
Yun nga kasi, of course, one of the fears, no, Asec Bringas, yung mga schools, takot sila hindi mabayaran. And takot sila na kung dito magkaroon ng anomalya, no, while getting this DSWD certification. And we understand, of course, that getting this certification should kind of safeguard the educational institution or the schools. Can you tell us how you plan to, I know wala pang IRR, but where is this going, no, in terms of safeguarding both parties from possible misuse of this new law?
Well, in the version of the law that was signed by the President, meron tayong provision doon na nagsasabi naman na it will not prejudice the schools to be able to collect the tuition fees from the families of the learners who may be availing of this disadvantaged status at the time of the examination. may mga naka-indicate naman na provisions doon na pwede silang mag-avail ng mga administrative or even civil actions para ma-compel or ma-singil pa rin yung mga tuition fees of these learners.
Are you taking seriously the suggestion of COCOPEA, no, that the schools themselves na lang yung mag-a-assess ng justifiability, whether or not okay ba talaga yung mga reasons ng students for not paying fees and allow them to take exams?
Yeah, well, I guess the COCOPEA and even the private schools were present during the deliberations of this bill in Congress as well as in the Senate. So I hope that during the debate, napag-usapan na yan and finally nga ipala yung version na lumabas and it's already signed to law. So we have no choice but to implement the law and to put this as part of the items or components of the monitoring that the department will be doing over the private schools.
Asec, what is classified as a disadvantaged student? Would you have more definition to that?
Well, the only definition or description that we have is still the wordings in the law that is as it is now, but definitely dun sa crafting ng IRR, baka magkaroon na tayo ng clarifications niyan, and even the criteria on when to classify a child to be in a disadvantage status. Pero may mga na-mention doon, those during kapag may mga emergencies, calamities at the time na magkaroon ng exam, and even merong provision doon for good or justifiable reasons. So that is a wording that needs to be defined and clarified by the IRR.
Nakasulat din po sa batas that this is for both public and private institutions. But sa K-12 mandated po for the entire year. Could you clarify what that means?
Well, actually, kung titignan natin, the K-12 in the public sector would not be that affected because it's free. We have free public education in the Philippines for the basic education at least. At definitely hindi tayo nagko-collect ng mga tuition fees during periodic exams. So it's not going to impact the basic education in public schools that much.
I think it's going to boil down to the definitions that you work into the IRR, no? So for instance, that phrase, good and justifiable reasons, a lot of it is going to come down to that. Are you going to be specifying exactly what circumstances qualify for good and justifiable reasons?
Well, the DSWD is mandated to prepare the IRR in consultation with stakeholders. So definitely the Department of Education, the CHED, as well as the TESDA will be part of the committee that will prepare the IRR, or at least we can comment on the draft IRR so that whatever things that we wish to be part of the IRR for implementing the law would be configured by the DSWD as well.
Okay, but we're looking to be as specific as possible, are we?
Yes, it should be very, very specific, considering that we have some concerns about how and when do we classify a learner to be in a disadvantaged status based on how the law was written.
Alright, Asec, huling tanong na lang from me, no? Meron kayong maraming ahensya involved at maraming stakeholders involved to draft the IRR, andyan yung DepEd, DSWD, CHED, TESDA, and of course the education sector stakeholders. How are talks going? And can you assure the public na talagang lahat ng stakeholders ay napapakinggan in terms of deliberating the IRR for this law?
Yeah, we will of course give opportunity for all educational stakeholders to have a part or at least to comment, and we will consult them properly, no? Para yung IRR niyan ay ma-meet talaga niya yung purpose of the law, which is to give equal opportunities to all learners regardless of their situation. So we will engage our education stakeholders.
Okay. And we will check back in with you on that. Thanks for joining us in the meantime. That was DepEd Assistant Secretary for Operations and Deputy Spokesperson Francis Bringas.
Dami nating lalagay sa spreadsheet at kailangan check up
things that we have to track
in 60 days and 6 months. But that's it for the big story on this Monday night.
Quite a busy Monday.
Always.
Hoping for a good week. Well, we are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in and have a good night.